This podcast is brought to you by United Way of Cast Clay. United Way of Cast Clay strives to create a vibrant, welcoming community where everyone can thrive. Get involved at unitedwaycastclay.org.
James Butler Wild Bill Hickok was undoubtedly carrying at least one sidearm in the gold mining town of Deadwood in what was then Dakota Territory. So, what happened to Hickok's gun? You're listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast featuring true crime and general intrigue from the Upper Midwest. I'm Chris Kurzman, reading a story that appeared on the Mitchell Republic website on September 13th, 2022, written by Jeremy Fugelberg. The true tale of Old West legend Wild Bill Hickok ends in tragedy. The legendary lawman and gunslinger shot from behind as he played a game of cards in a saloon in Deadwood, Dakota Territory in 1876. As he slumped over the gambling table, Hickok wasn't wielding a weapon, but was holding cards that became known as the dead man's hand of black aces and black eights, a moment immortalized in pop culture, including the first episode of the HBO series Deadwood. Now, for the first time since that moment, the weapon Hickok might have drawn to defend himself has surfaced in public, a Smith & Wesson Model No. 2 Army revolver. The .32 caliber gun was sold at auction by Rock Island Auction Company in Illinois on August 27th for $235,000. The weapon has a tale to tell, all its own. On that day in August 1876, it was no secret who had shot Hickok in Newtall and Mann's saloon in the gold rush town of Deadwood. A man named Jack Crooked Nose McCall, who had a beef with Hickok, stood there holding a smoking .45 Colt before fleeing the saloon. McCall was acquitted in a hastily improvised trial before later being rearrested and found guilty in a formal court proceeding, then hanged in 1877. Hickok was buried in the nearby Ingleside Cemetery, but his remains were later moved to a peaceful yet prominent burial spot in the town's Mount Moriah Cemetery, a location that remains a top attraction for tourists who visit the South Dakota town. His belongings were sold to pay his burial costs and other debts. Hickok, whose full name was James Butler Hickok, was undoubtedly carrying at least one sidearm as he gambled in the rough and tumble town. So what happened to Hickok's gun? In a blog post, Rock Island Auction tracks the ownership history of the Smith & Wesson revolver, known as its provenance. They track how Hickok was known to be carrying a Smith & Wesson Model No. 2 Army revolver, and how this weapon, in particular, is proven to belong to Hickok, as proved by its serial number and a sworn affidavit. The gun is chambered in .32 rimfire, has varnished rosewood grips, and a blued finish, although it's worn off on the gun's 6-inch barrel. Sheriff Seth Bullock reportedly gave Hickok's gun to a Captain Emil Willoth to pay off the slain man's store debt, according to Rock Island's research. Willoth later left the pistol to his wife Hazel and son Emil Jr. Rock Island wrote in its research post, quote, "Author and shooter Ed McGivern provides significant provenance for this Hickok gun in his book, Fast and Fancy Revolver Shooting, stating that a Mrs. Hazel Willoth has Wild Bill's gun sealed up in a case just as her husband left it when he died, and she won't allow it to be taken out. The gun was given to Mr. Willoth, a Deadwood stage driver, storekeeper, and Hazel's father-in-law, by Seth Bullock, Lawrence County's first sheriff. But the Willoth gun's strong proof of its original ownership led it to be initially put up for auction in 2013. At that time, bidders failed to meet the, quote, steep reserve set by the gun owners and were only willing to pay $220,000 for a gun valued at between $300,000 and $500,000, according to a Reuters report. But on August 27th, the gun sold for $235,000 at an auction that included the sale of Han Solo's DL-44 Heavy Blaster, one of several used in the filming of Star Wars: A New Hope. The movie prop weapon, by comparison, netted $1.06 million. You've been listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast covering true crime and general intrigue from the Upper Midwest. Forum Communications is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org.